Oh my god, are you serious?
A month after giving birth to my daughter, I came home from my parents. When my husband returned from work and saw me, he dropped his bag at the entrance and exclaimed,
Don't you look too different from before?
Excuse me? I'm Lisa, 31 years old. I was a housewife who had a baby a month before. I had stayed with my parents since giving birth and was very much looking forward to the new life with the three of us at home. When I finally returned, I was greeted with heartless comments from my husband Darren. I was absolutely stunned, wondering how he could say such things before even seeing his baby for the first time. We got married through an office romance. I worked in the accounting department after graduating from high school, and he was my boss at that time. We bought a house close to work. I was originally from across the country and had returned to be with my parents a little before my due date. A month after I delivered my daughter Carrie, I came back home with her. Darren was too busy with work to fly over for the delivery, so it was his first time meeting the baby. And yet, so very nice of you. I just had a long way back with the baby, and what a warm welcome. At first, I thought he was joking, so I sarcastically retorted. He turned out to be serious.
Well, you look like you put on 20 pounds.
It's normal to gain up to 35 pounds for childbirth. It's written in the maternity handbook. I have to be strong enough to give birth and produce milk. I'm also going to need a lot of energy to deal with a crying baby throughout the night. It's perfectly normal.
No kidding. That is outrageous.
During my flight, I excitedly imagined many words of welcome from him, including,
I've been waiting for you guys. I missed you so much. Let me hold my daughter.
Instead, he left me with the most unexpected comment without even holding the baby and locked himself in the bedroom in dismay. I was shocked and hurt hearing his unpleasant remarks and seeing his mocking attitude and his withdrawal from disappointment. I dropped the diaper bag just as he did with his bag. I was hopeful that his mood was going to improve after a night's sleep and went to bed in the spare bedroom with Carrie. The next day, I came to realize that his behavior the night before was just the beginning. Soon, the excessive mocking of my weight began. I had learned at the breastfeeding class that sweet potatoes increased breast milk supply. When he saw me eating them as a snack,
What a potato doing eating a sweet potato? It's cannibalism. Oh wow, it's gross seeing fat people eat. I heard that pigs eat grains. You need to eat more grains. Oink.
he had fun ridiculing me. Moreover,
I've been patiently waiting for, our nights again. As a healthy guy, I expected to get right back to it. But you know what? I don't think that's possible. It's going to be like work even if I want to do it. It was a business. I'd get paid. This doesn't accrue wages. It's the equivalent of illicit unpaid overwork.
as an accountant, he impressively converted his sex life into wages.
We need to take cost-cutting measures. We are not going to have sex for the sake of business efficiency. The reason is due to a change in management policy that you no longer look like a woman.
He went on making fun of me. Whenever he opened his mouth, some cruel remarks about my body came out. I never heard anything else coming out of his mouth anymore. He didn't even participate in housework or childcare. I was happy just being with Carrie though. I didn't have to listen to anything he said. I tried to think of him as a noisy parrot in the house and didn't let him bother me so much. Then, something happened that drove me through the roof. That was the day Darren came home drunk from his work event. He sat on a chair and bent over the table in the living room. His face was looking toward me, who was breastfeeding Carrie next to him. He let out a booze-sensed burp and started to say something incoherent with his slurred speech.
I'm thinking, babies aren't as cute as they seem. She's kind of bald and her skin is reddish, and she can only make weird sounds.
What are you talking about?
I'm sure people are just saying they are cute, but they don't really think so. I'm an honest guy. An accountant must have an analytical view of the business.
You're making no sense.
So, I see you feeding a not-so-pretty thing. And I know that you gained weight to produce the not-so-pretty thing. And then your boobs will sag from being sucked, right? It's disgusting. I mean, look at your upper belly and lower belly. You're like a roly-poly bug.
What the hell?
I can't see you as anything else but that. Oh my god, I'm freaking out now. I can't have sex with a roly-poly. That's like mating with a different species.
He suddenly pulled my hand and dragged me with the baby into the spare bedroom. What the hell do you think you're doing? I resisted, but before I had time to scream, he pushed us into the room and shut the door.
Seriously, roly-poly? You stay in the nest.
He then went on to sing none other than roly-poly as he went to take a shower. Unforgivable. He mocked not only me, but his daughter too. Even though he was drunk, it was way out of line. I felt homicidal, but I nursed my baby in the dark room and went to bed. When I opened the door the next morning, my anger reached a boiling point immediately. It wasn't because Darren's clothes were strewn about on the path to the bathroom, or the used glass was left behind on the table. I saw a paper taped on the door of the bedroom I was shoved into. It said, Roly-Poly's room. It was illegible handwriting in magic marker, but it was for sure Darren's. I swore to God that I was not going to forgive him for that. I began to plot my retaliation against him right there, right then. The first step was to reinvent myself. Firstly, I put the Roly-Poly's room sign in my new bedroom. I was going to look at it whenever I felt like giving up. On the opposite wall, I put up a poster of Jennifer Lopez. I had always been a fan of hers. She had a great style and made me want to be like her. It was perfect to keep my motivation up. Thus began my long-term revenge project in the Roly-Poly's room. There were plenty of workouts I could do at home. I basically stood on my toes to move around inside the house. Whenever I wanted to sit down, I did wall sits. I did squats while doing laundry and brushing my teeth, and crunches after each feeding. My midwife told me that the postpartum body had softer fat, which was easier to burn off. She was right, and my weight went down in no time. When Carrie got a little older, I put her on my stomach during my sit-ups, and she cackled every time my face came near her. I worked on my strength training and diet while taking care of her. Before I knew it, I was back to my pre-baby shape. I sweat a lot while training, so I kept the same tracksuits I wore right after childbirth, and only changed the elastic waistband. I didn't need to dress up in front of Darren, and of course, I didn't bother with makeup either. He had nicknamed me Roly-Poly, and didn't even notice my changes because my clothes stayed the same. He paid no attention to me anyway. The second step was to deteriorate the husband. If I was to rise, I had to lower my rival relative to myself. I was on a mission to fatten up Darren. His office didn't have a cafeteria, so I prepared a high-calorie lunchbox with meat and fried food. As for dinner, he normally returned around 9 p.m., and I tempted him with his favorite food like pizza and fried chicken. I had my dinner with Carrie at 6 p.m. My meals consisted of 70% vegetables and 30% meat. I tried my best to minimize my carb intake and substituted with cauliflowers and tofu instead. It reduced the stress of not having rice or bread. If I felt hungry, I held out for 10 minutes and hunger went away. If it persisted, I looked at myself in the mirror and then looked at the poster of J-Lo. The hunger turned into guilt, so I was about to suppress my appetite. Of course, I knew that it wasn't enough to keep me going, so I started twittering. I just took a picture of my bare belly every day before I showered. I posted a picture and the exercises I did under the handle name Lisa at Home Diet. 4 years had passed since then, and Carrie started preschool. Darren started to give more attention to her once she was able to speak. However, I had no intention to forget and move on after he had upset me so much. I could no longer forgive him for what he said to me when I gave birth. In addition, I had been able to keep the voltage of my anger for that long, since my nickname had been established as Roly-Poly by him. When Carrie started preschool, I started working part-time at a local fitness club. I was only a receptionist and a cleaner, but since the clients were very conscious about their health and beauty, my own sense was further heightened. It was even more motivating for me whenever the clients told me, "You look great! You're so toned." I was convinced that I reached the level I had been aiming for at last. Well, it was about time. I decided that I was going to get back at Darren for the past 4 years. I set up a meeting on one Tuesday at 1 p.m. The location was a cafe his parents run in the center of the city. Thanks to being featured by influencers, it was always crowded. They hadn't seen Carrie since she was a baby, so I decided to bring her there. I was told that Tuesday afternoons were relatively slow, and it was easier for them to take a break. They planned to leave the cafe to their staff and enjoy the time with Carrie for the first time in a while. Darren had to work in the morning, but took the afternoon off to meet us there. After I sent him off, I carefully put on my makeup and ironed my hair. It was always tied in a messy knot at home, but when I put in an effort, it became shiny and straight. My normally non-existing eyebrows were drawn, and instead of a tracksuit, I put on a body-hugging dress. It was a size 6. I wasn't going to let him call me Roly-Poly anymore. I intentionally arrived at the cafe 10 minutes late. I had gotten a text from Darren saying he was already there.
"You're late. Roly-Poly is slow to move."
I saw an additional text at the entrance of the cafe. Snap! I took a screenshot and put my phone in my bag. Brace yourself. I took one deep breath and rolled my shoulders back. The door made a clanging sound, and Carrie and I walked in. My mother-in-law Lori saw us first. "You are here!" She smiled ear to ear. "Oh, how nice to see you, Lisa! I missed you and you too, Carrie." "It's been a long time, Lori." I gave her a peck on the cheek. "Let's talk in the back today. Darren's already here." "Oh, aren't you just so adorable, sweet little bean?" She was more interested in playing with her granddaughter than serving customers. She turned to the staff and asked her to take charge. When I walked to the back and saw the back of Darren, he turned around hearing my footsteps.
"How long do you make me wait, Rolly?"
When he saw me, he froze in time. I had no idea that human eyes were capable of opening so wide. His nostrils also flared up so big, and his jaw dropped. I thought he could have been a Guinness World Champion in opening all the holes in his face. He stared at me in silence. "Hi, Darren." I greeted him in a deliberately distant manner. "Carrie looks so sweet and beautiful, just like you, Lisa." Lori joined us with 5 slices of tiramisu, which was the best seller in the cafe. Silence ensued, so I spoke up. You seem to be at a loss for words.
Oh, well.
As he was flustering, my father-in-law Mark showed up.
I've been waiting for you guys. I've missed you, sweet little Carrie.
Surrounding her, the in-laws couldn't stop smiling, seeing how cute and cuddly she was. In contrast to them, Darren forced a tight smile.
Well, of course, she got our genes.
The battle was to begin. Without a moment's hesitation, I followed him with, "Well, it's you and Roly-Poly's baby, right?" He froze, and his parents stopped playing with Carrie. "What did you just say?" Lori was confused. "Roly-Poly, that's what he has been calling me. He said he couldn't see me as a woman after the baby was born."
Wait a minute. I didn't know you lost weight.
You didn't notice, did you? You shoved me into the spare room, so you didn't have to look at me, right? And you didn't even see the changes. For the past 4 years, you've been calling me Roly-Poly and never even looked at me. You said I was disgusting. I took a piece of paper with Roly-Poly's room written on it out of my bag and put it on the table. My in-laws were stunned. "Mark, Lori," I continued, "I'm sure you can see what I have been dealing with just from this paper alone. I have been verbally abused by him for a long time. This is not the only evidence." I took out my phone. There were screenshots of all the horrible messages he had sent me. Of course, I showed the one I took upon my arrival too. His parents were taken aback by their sheer amount of them.
Darren, how could you?
Mark squeezed out his voice as if he was in pain.
Oh, give me a break. Evidence for what?
Darren shouted in rage. Then, we heard giggles from behind. Seriously? 2 teenage girls at the table nearby glanced at us and laughed. How can a creepy old man like that yell at the beautiful woman? So wrong. Crazy, creepy, fat, and hot-headed. It's a real quadruple handicap. Their laughter and conversation could be heard at our table. You call me Roly-Poly, but have you looked at yourself in the mirror? You're overweight and greasy. I paused for a moment and said in disgust, You look like a beetle. Having said all this, I turned to my in-laws and showed them a picture. Please have a look. That's Carrie right after she was born, and me. Oh, Carrie, you're so tiny here. How cute. I'm so happy to have you as my grandchild. Rolly looked at it and was in tears. When I came back after giving birth, he said that I was disgusting and had no appeal as a woman. On top of that, my breast and stomach are dropping, and he gave me the nickname of Roly-Poly. He also said that Carrie was not cute. My in-laws were speechless. So, I took out the folder of divorce papers from my bag. I've just shown you the evidence of the abuse. I would like to end our marriage now.
Wait a minute. You are supposed to be the Roly-Poly that hangs on to me. How do you plan to make a living?
It was too much of an unexpected question, and my response was immediate. I switched screens on the phone I had just put out on the desk. Twitter, Lisa at Home Diet. I had over 10,000 followers. I showed this to the manager of the fitness club. He said he will hire me full-time. In my comment section, it's amazing that you can tone up that much at home. You give all the housewives hope. You look great. I admire you. There were compliments after another. Enough! Rolly suddenly shouted. Darren, you have no idea how hard it is for us to give birth. It's the hardest work that the human body can endure. The reason why we gain weight is to maintain our strength for the delivery. Mothers hardly sleep to protect their babies too. You know nothing. You don't even try to understand that. And you make fun of her. I don't know how to apologize to her. Shame on you. Then she turned to me. Dear, I apologize on behalf of my stupid son. I will do whatever I can to make up for his mistakes. Tell me anything. So please let me continue to see this cute little being from time to time.
Well, since we are busy running our cafe, we won't bother you so often. It would be great if we could celebrate her birthdays here, of course without Darren.
Thus, I started working as a single mother at a fitness club. My friends say how pretty mommy is, Carrie tells me sometimes. I always respond to her, well, you have to work hard to be beautiful inside and outside. It's important to believe in yourself and be patient to achieve your goal. I hope you will grow up to be a diligent person. On the other hand, what has happened to the beetle, previously Darren? Lori tells me that he has hoped to get back together with me by going on a diet, but he hasn't been able to endure the food restriction. He's still a pump beetle. I'm working full-time at the fitness club now. My Twitter followers have exceeded 20,000. I have even been approached by a publisher. Housewives can achieve anything. We have to take our own happiness into our own hands. I would like to continue motivating all the housewives who are trying their best.
I'm Dawn, 50 years old. I live peacefully with my husband. Until a few years ago, our lives were stormy. My mother-in-law Karen, who lived alone, became bedridden about 10 years ago. She tripped and fell at the entrance of her home and fractured her pelvis. She underwent 2 surgeries and spent quite a long time in the hospital. She was reluctant to undergo rehabilitation even though the muscles in her lower body had deteriorated. The nurses and physiotherapists who were exasperated with her began to contact me every day. Even though my husband Jeremy and I tried to persuade her, she didn't get out of bed. You will understand if you are in my situation. Do you know how hard it is not to be able to move your body the way you want to? Karen was pessimistic about her inability and often took it out on those around her. It was not unusual to hear her yelling from her hospital room. I knew that nothing I could say would help. I asked Jeremy to speak to her patiently, but he quickly gave up on her stubbornness. If she doesn't want to do it, then don't do it. Karen and he were equally stubborn, so it was hard to get them to come to terms. Even though the doctor told her that she would become almost bedridden if she didn't move, she showed no sign of concern, as if she had given up. She even said that if that happened, she wanted to move in with us. Jeremy and she were actually not blood related. She was the second wife of his late father, and after he passed away, she lived with Jeremy. She was after her late husband's fortune when she married. However, things didn't go as well with him as she hoped for. I heard that she still held a grudge over the failed succession of inheritance. I married into such a family and lived separately from her. I wanted to avoid living with such a nervous and selfish mother-in-law, even if she needed nursing care. I patiently tried to convince her to go to rehabilitation, but nothing changed. When I made a final proposal to transfer her to a hospital with a rehabilitation ward, she finally agreed. It was an hour-and-a-half drive from our house. I thought that she would complain when I told her that I couldn't come to visit her as often as before, but surprisingly, she accepted easily. Her muscular strength had deteriorated considerably during the time she had complained. I felt weary when I was told by the physiotherapist that she needed to work patiently. After 3 months in the hospital, she was discharged. Even though she got out, she was not able to move as freely as used to. I talked with Jeremy about admitting her into an assisted living facility since it had been impossible for her to live alone. She adamantly refused and demanded to live with us. "I don't want to go to a facility. Are you trying to abandon me?" She told all her friends and relatives that we were trying to get rid of her. We were made to look like the bad guys. I feel sorry for her. You're the eldest son, so you should take good care of her. Jeremy received numerous calls from his uncles and aunts. In the end, he was forced to agree with Karen. It was such a calculated ploy by the mother, who knew so well that her son cared about his reputation. He tried to prepare the house as best as he could to keep her quiet from complaining all the time. He installed a ramp at the entrance, bought a high-performance nursing bed, and so on. He was confident that she wasn't going to say anything. Contrary to his thought, she had something outrageous in her mind. "You're my daughter-in-law, so you're responsible for taking care of me." She demanded that I look after her 24/7. I had a job and was not in a position to obey her. If I wanted her to live without any inconvenience, I needed a professional helper. Besides, Jeremy's income was not enough to support all of us. I couldn't quit my job to maintain our lifestyle. Jeremy disclosed the situation to her, but she was adamant. "I don't want to be cared for by a stranger. Why can't I ask her to fulfill her duty as a daughter-in-law?" If we didn't listen to her, she threatened us by saying she was going to tell all the relatives that we were heartless people. As soon as he heard the word relatives, he shut up. Thus, I had to work, raise a child, and take care of her. To do so, I resigned from the company where I had worked for a long time, and instead, I took a part-time job at a nearby diner. My income dropped dramatically, and the time I spent with Karen increased. "Hey, how long are you going to make me wait? Bring me my food now." When I was at home, she was very noisy. If I was even a little late in preparing the meal, she yelled at me so loudly that it echoed throughout the house. She was also very particular about how I served the food. Tea had to be scorching hot. There had to be a variety of food, including Italian, Mexican, and Asian dishes. A side of vegetables at every meal was a must. Meat and fish had to be domestic products. It was very annoying for me as she was only crippled and had a normal appetite. Perhaps because she had nothing else to look forward to, there was no compromise at all when it came to food. If the food was even slightly cold, she asked me to reheat it. If she didn't like the menu, she ordered me to cook something else. It was a lot of work just to prepare a meal on top of helping her with personal care. She could not bathe by herself, so I had to help her. She refused to wear a diaper, and every time she needed to go to the bathroom, no matter how busy I was summoned to take her to the bathroom. The room had to be aired several times a day and had to be cleaned every day. Bed sheets and pillowcases were also changed daily. It was an absolute no-no to throw her good clothes and bedding into a dryer. She dared to claim that she couldn't sleep on a sheet that was not exposed to the sun every day. When it rained non-stop and the laundry didn't dry, she whined endlessly. How was I supposed to control the weather? I almost went off at her so many times. The biggest hassle was taking her to rehab once a week. The storm of complaints ravaged from the day before. She got even crankier and refused to go when I didn't pay her enough attention. Plenty of complaints kept coming out of her mouth before, during, and after rehab. I was on the verge of a mental breakdown listening to her negativity all the time. I felt as if I was trapped in a cage. Jeremy and I repeatedly asked her if we could hire a helper. The answer was always negative. Don't you feel ashamed to ask a stranger to take care of your family member? She made it sound as if we were the wrongdoer. I continued to work like a servant in obedience to her. 5 years had passed since she moved in with us, and she suddenly changed her attitude. I've decided to hire a helper for myself. Just make sure you pay for it. Jeremy and I wondered what had gotten into her head for changing 180 degrees. Regardless, I was overjoyed to be freed from the burden at last. I suddenly felt motivated to make arrangements for her. She did all the work, and everything was decided in no time. She arranged to have the expenses deducted monthly from her account, and I transferred the necessary amount there every month. It cost money, but she had long-term care insurance that covered half. If I worked full-time like before, I could manage to pay the bills. The helper came on weekdays, so we had never met her. My burden was considerably reduced both physically and mentally, and I felt more relaxed. Working outside also relieved my stress. The helper also took her to rehab, which was the hardest part of my life. She was like a lifesaver to me. I only had to transfer money to Karen's account every month, and that was it. 10 years had passed since she became bedridden, and a question arose in my mind. After a few years of hiring a helper, I had never once seen her. I didn't even know which agency she came from. I had my doubts about whether the money was really being passed on to the helper. When I spoke to Jeremy about it, he vehemently agreed. I had been transferring expenses every month, but I had never checked to see if they had been debited. He asked Karen to show her bank activities, but she stubbornly refused, saying that it was a private matter. You are trying to steal money from me. She turned away from him, and he could not find out. We couldn't even contact the helper as we never got the details. When our suspicions grew stronger, Jeremy suggested something. Let's set these up to see if the helper is really here. He bought small cameras on his way home from work. After making sure Karen was asleep that night, we set them up in various places around the house. When we checked the recordings, our jaws dropped to the floor. A short time after we left for work, she got up from the bed like nothing was wrong with her. After stretching and moving her neck and shoulders to relieve stiffness, she walked out of her room without a care in the world. When she returned a little later, she had an ice cream in her hand. We were speechless at the sight of her sitting on the bed and eating it. She walked around the house and took a shower by herself. After that, she changed her clothes and put on makeup, and then there was a sound of the front door opening. She must have gone out. When she returned 30 minutes later, she was carrying a bag in both hands. Inside were a large number of snacks. We were amused to see her hide them in the back of the closet so that we didn't find them. It seems that when we were not around during the day, she acted like a normal person, and when we came home, she instantly went into acting like a cripple. What the hell is going on? What is this? We murmured at the same time. Karen had completely healed. She had not been taking her rehabilitation seriously. I wondered how she managed to get better. Seeing her as a normal, healthy person, the anger I had been holding back until now welled up inside me. I couldn't remain silent for sure. I had to question her. Jeremy felt the same way. One evening, we came home on time and carried out the plan together. Karen watched the news every day on TV we bought for her. The news began to play loudly from her room as usual. We took advantage of that moment and operated the TV with a multifunctional remote control. She was surprised at the sudden change of the screen. The real show was about to begin. She was speechless at the image of herself walking leisurely through the house. The plan was to get her to talk by showing her all images captured by the cameras. She tried to turn off the TV with her remote control, but I quickly turned it back on with mine. We kept switching on and off for a while until she finally became impatient and glared at me. "You, give me that right now. Why don't you just come and get it yourself? You can walk, right?" I turned on the TV again and showed her the image. They were high-performance cameras that also recorded the sound of her cheerful humming perfectly. All of her daily activities were recorded on those. She stubbornly continued to turn it off, but when Jeremy snatched the remote from her hand, she was finally unable to resist. "If you don't want to watch it so badly, why don't you just walk over to the TV yourself and turn it off at the base?" His glare was harsh. She turned pale and tried to read our faces, and then she slowly stood up. She walked with a limp, but it was too deliberate after all that. As I stared at her coldly, she turned off the main power of the TV. The room became quiet. She seemed to be racking her brain trying to come up with some excuse. When she couldn't think of anything, she slowly sat down on the bed and began frantically apologizing. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry." It was the first time I had ever heard her apologize. After that, she mumbled some kind of excuse. When Jeremy demanded that she explain clearly at once, she nervously began to tell us how she got better. When she started rehabilitation, her legs were already strong enough to walk. She recovered incredibly well after a few sessions and was able to walk normally within a week. Once she recovered, she needed to go back to living alone. If she pretended to be crippled, she was able to live with us. She thought it would have been an easier life for her and decided to keep acting the part. She refused rehabilitation so that she could imprint herself as a quirky person and reduced the number of trips to the hospital after she was discharged. I let out a deep sigh at how shallow and selfish she was. She told us that she just wanted to live an easy life. In the beginning, she enjoyed feeling superior by using me as a servant. When she began to feel annoyed with my earnest attempts to care for her, she lied about hiring a helper. She took money from us for her entertainment. Most of it was spent on social games such as lab simulations and music games. The amount I was transferring to her was not enough, and she was even taking it out from her pension. She told the doctor that she was able to walk again thanks to the training, and stopped rehabilitation a few days after she told us she wanted to hire a helper. We took care of all her living expenses, so she had no worries about spending her own money. She spent 10 years of her life using me as her servant without a care in the world. We could never forgive her. Get out of here as soon as possible. I nodded in agreement. You can walk and even take a shower by yourself. You can even go shopping alone. You don't need nursing care at all. You don't need to live with us. Karen looked up and instantly burst into tears. Please let me stay here. Her house had already been torn down and the land sold. She couldn't live alone anymore. She went on and on with selfish excuses. Her shallow scheme of living a financially and physically easy life was so obvious, and yet she kept pleading to rely on us. Our determination was unshakable. Move out in a week. Jeremy left the room with that. I was about to follow him when she hastily grabbed my arm. Please, you're on my side, aren't you? It's true that we haven't gotten along well, but isn't it a normal thing between in-laws? We can get along with each other from now on. I'll help you with anything at home. She didn't realize that the reason we didn't get along and I had a hard time were all because of her. I shook off her hand and said quietly, like you said before, you don't want to be taken care of by a stranger. I am your daughter-in-law, but you're like a stranger to me. Can you please stop referring me like I'm family only when it suits you? She slowly crumbled down to the floor. I walked away without looking back. After that, she didn't make any effort to move out. Jeremy got impatient and started packing for her. The sight of him stuffing her personal belongings into boxes was frightful, and she was unable to protest. She had rented a small apartment in a hurry, but she was going to have a hard time living on her pension alone. Even the money from selling the land was spent on stupid games, and she didn't have much left. She could no longer rely on us and asked for help from her friends and relatives. We had shown the recordings to all kinds of people, so no one was likely to give her helping hands. Everyone was furious to find out that she pretended to be physically disabled for 10 years. They refused to get involved with her in any way. Jeremy demanded she pays back the 10 years of living expenses and the money that was supposed to be paid for a helper. She cried and tried to default, saying she didn't have that kind of money, but when we threatened to take her to court, she shut up. She's now cleaning offices in the morning and working at a factory during the day to make ends meet. She pretended to be disabled for a long time and stole our time and money as much as she wanted. I'm sure she's suffering from the painful repercussions. What a pathetic end for a woman who married for money and tried to live comfortably by deceiving her son and his wife. We have been able to get back to our peaceful lives for the first time in 10 years. Even if Karen truly needs care in the future, we would not reach out to her. Well, if she's that tough, I'm sure she will live a long and healthy life.